The story begins with the fact that one fine day Stephen decided to take a bath. In the bathroom cabinet, he was looking for a very interesting magic potion. And finally a smile appeared on the guy's face, because he found the very same magic potion. He poured the secret liquid into the bathtub, where the water had already been drawn, and then ran his finger over the water so that the liquid would mix. The incredible beautiful color of the water illuminated the whole room. At one point, a ball formed in the water, and it looked like a regular soap bubble. A few moments later a miracle happened. Very abruptly and quickly from this soap bubble something unearthly began to be born. Within seconds, there was a huge monster standing in the guy's bathroom. Stephen greeted his new friend and then introduced himself and said welcome. The magical beast did not understand where it was. The bathroom seemed to be a very interesting and unusual place. You could see how the monster was afraid and uncomfortable. Then near the toilet, it found a toilet accessory and immediately showed it to the guy, asking what it was, but Stephen quickly resolved the situation. The guy decided that it was time to give his new magical friend a little tour and took him into the living room. Going into the kitchen, on the table Stephen took the booklets, which were both in English and on the gem. He gave them to his new magical friend and said to familiarize himself. As soon as the magical friend familiarized himself with the booklets, the guy said that it was time for them to go, and together they went to Stephen's car. This guy was as positive as possible. In the car he took out his favorite cassette with music and put it in the player of the car for mood and better environment. Then the heroes went on a journey through a very interesting world, as the Earth became an independent planet. Driving through the city, Stephen said that in this world now everyone can realize their dreams. Lars opened his own pastry shop, said he became a famous musician, and does very cool concerts. And the girl Connie is getting ready to realize her dream, and preparing for her college entrance exams. The heroes headed further and further into the city towards a small home school. Stephen also said that together with his friends they were planning to realize their dreams. The guy explained that here the gems have the opportunity to rediscover themselves and learn to live properly on the land. So to speak, forge a new interesting and fascinating personality. Cultivate new ideas and a new understanding of this world. And it's even possible to find your inner pestilence. The monster asked what pestilence was, but Stephen replied that their goal was to answer just such questions. Not far from the heroes, there was a daily meditation ritual in the center of the city. The presenter calmly and peacefully reported information for self-discovery. Many people repeated after her and tried to immerse themselves in the trance of meditation as much as possible, as it is very important for the reflection of their soul. At one point the phone rang, and there was an unknown number on the receiver. The Pearl girl picked up the phone and said she was on the line. The girl was demonstrating new hologram technologies. Her double was standing next to her and talking to her on the phone. She was demonstrating how the modern gadget of mankind works, namely the telephone. Stephen was explaining about the new world and the new orders to his new friend. She was surprised by the technology of this world. Then they went to Professor Métis, who had already started her lecture. The heroes kindly sat down and started listening to the lecture. This lecture was about how to make decisions independently and quickly. And the first assignment was that there are no assignments. Then Métis suggested that Stephen have lunch with her, and he instantly agreed. Together they went to the embankment where there was a bench. Sitting down on it, they began their conversation. Métis said that opening a school was the best idea of her life, but suddenly she noticed that she had lost her mood. Stephen was sad because unfortunately not everyone wanted to live a better life in this world, and that made him sad. Métis said that he should just forget about everything and start living. After lunch, the protagonist goes into the forest After walking a few kilometers of forest, in front of his eyes was a rock in which clearly someone lived. At first Stephen was scared, but then he pulled himself together and started to slowly move forward closer and closer to this place. Every rustle provoked the boy to look at the forest again, but there was nothing around. Then he looked up from the couch and saw something. On a high cliff stood a powerful, strong and bright woman who shouted to the guide to stop. Then she jumped off the rock and was right in front of the guy, so he tensed up even more. She asked what he wanted and why he dared to come to her. Stephen started to explain that he had just come to ask how she was doing, but this girl wasn't listening to him at all and her surroundings only distracted her. Seeing a bug crawling by, she stepped sharply with her foot and destroyed it. That's a tough guy's moment to watch out for even more. Then the cruel woman said that she was ready to destroy and crush anyone who would come into her domain. Stephen asked why there were so many big rocks around. The stiff girl grabbed one of them and said they were for strength. Then with a sudden strong movement, she picked up a huge stone and threw it with all her might at the rest of the pile of stones. Stephen was startled. After that, the guy decided to joke that he thought the girl was doing art, because this pile of stones perfectly emphasizes the landscape. The guy was very surprised that the girl continues her hard training, because the moment has come when there is simply no one to fight with. But the girl interrupted him, saying that there is always someone to fight. Just now there are no worthy opponents against her. Stephen started saying that if it wasn't for him, this girl would be a monster, which made her very angry, because she took it very hard. Then she said that she had never asked him for help in her life, and she didn't need it at all. The guy couldn't take it anymore, and said that he only came because he felt sorry for the girl, but in fact she was to blame for everything. She said that Stephen is a common weakling, and although he is a pink gem, but she will not do his bidding. Then she called him just a little useless little bug, and if he wants to tell her what to do, he needs to prove it in battle. Stephen burst into tears and announced that he was ready for these terms, and to start a battle with this big girl. Then the boy sharply struck his first blow, shifting his opponent a little. After that, the girl laughed and threw her strongest punch. Stephen had time to react, and around him activated a magical crystal protective ball that shielded him from the blow. The strongest wave and the force of the impact threw the guy far into the woods. Catching up with her opponent, the girl tried to strike again, but Stephen easily tried to dodge them. Strongly angry, the girl decided to strike a blow with her foot and sharply hit the balloon. Flying far away, the balloon and the guy crashed into a tree and the dome shattered. After this blow, the guy tried to get up faster, but suddenly he heard the sound of birds. As it turned out, the strongest blow to the tree had knocked over a nest of little birds that were about to be born. Stephen quickly and sharply tried to catch all the babies that had fallen out of the nest. With the help of his agility and speed, the guy succeeded, and all the birds ended up in their nest. The guy was very scared for them, then decided to protect them with the crystal dome, and then threw the orb to a safer place in the bushes. Then Stephen returned to the battle. Since he had already seen the big girl attack, he abruptly created a crystal shield and prepared to take the fight. A moment later, a strong sharp blow hit the guy's shield, and the strongest wave threw him to the ground. The big woman said that he had enough to help the feathered earthlings. Now he had to take the fight. But the guy replied that he would not stop and would help everyone around him. The girl said she didn't need his help, and then stepped her foot right on Stephen, cutting off his breath. Leaning closer to him, she informed him that he needed help now, because he naively thought he had defeated her, but he failed to do so. She went on to report that his help is not needed at all. Without his friends, the guy is just a nobody. The girl kept telling the guy how weak he was, thus making him even angrier, and the guy's color started to turn crystal pink. At one point, Steven became very angry, and his superpower overflowed, at which point his opponent flew away from the flash of this crystal power. Steven was surprised at his own abilities, but he quickly pulled himself together and decided to finish the job. Abruptly and quickly, the guy began to attack his opponent with strong and hard blows using his superpower. Before the guy struck his strongest blow, he said that he was not a weakling, and then he struck her with his fist very hard. The girl from the force of the blow flew several tens of meters throughout the forest, punching every tree on her way. After that, she laughed panically, gathered her strength, and began her attack again. The guy anticipated each of her blows and easily dodged each repeated attack. The girl decided to use her superpower. She turned into the strongest magic ball and attacked the guy. There was an incredibly large-scale and strong fight. But Steven managed to put his strong block, which easily stopped the girl's superpower. She was even very surprised by it. With a sharp movement, the guy sent the girl straight into the sky. Then he himself jumped high into the sky, pushed off his magic shield in flight, and struck a few more blows. The big woman just kept laughing in panic at everything that was happening. This laughter provoked Steven to anger even more, and each of his blows was even stronger. He then accumulated his superpower and struck as hard as possible from behind. The impact was so strong that instantly the big girl was already in the ground, several meters deep. At this moment, Steven was even afraid for his opponent and apologized for using such a crystalline force. The guy explained that he had misunderstood her. Maybe it was not her who needed to learn from him, but he had a lot to learn. After some thought, he decides to ask her to become a teacher. Steven explained that the girl had unlocked a power in him that he hadn't even realized he had, and now he possessed it. The girl approached him and told him that he could consider this difficult fight as his first and only training, and then walked away far into the depths of the forest. The next day, the mestizo prepared a surprise for Steven. When the guy took off the blindfold from his eyes, he was very pleasantly surprised. He found himself in a pizzeria, where fresh pizza smelled very good. Métis asked if the boy had noticed anything unusual, and then looking closer, he was very much surprised. At the new workplace, there was a common acquaintance, Bixbite, who perfectly coped with her new duties. She did her job efficiently, clearly, and quickly. As it turned out, Bixbite is as good as anyone at crumbling food, and her talent in the pizzeria came in handy. She skillfully, deftly, and quickly coped with her duties. The delicious fresh hot pizza was cooked very quickly and sliced by the new employee, and then delivered to the table still hot. Making a fresh hot pizza, she brought it to Steven and Métis' table, smiling at them, and then the girl remarked that it was the perfect pizza. To prove to the guy that it was the perfect pizza, Métis abruptly turned her finger into a ruler and began measuring the perfectly sliced pizza slices, so perfect that even every degree of the cut matched each other. The mestizo grabbed the first slice of pizza, swallowed it quickly, and then started telling the guy how good and cool she had come up with the whole thing. That it was just the best and most awesome idea she'd ever had in her life. At that moment, one bodyguard in a suit entered the door of the establishment, followed by a second one, and after they reported that the situation was clear, Mrs. Mayer entered the pizzeria. Steven was surprised that the girl and Ruby found a job, and now they are the new bodyguards of the measure, as the girl admitted that she has huge plans to combine humans and gems together. After a delicious lunch, the heroes went to the amusement park, where Métis wanted to show more of her cool new ideas to her boyfriend. She had a lot of cool new ideas, and she wanted to show them off as soon as possible. When they entered the park, the first thing they noticed was the child playing and throwing rings with his father, and the gem catching them. Stephen was surprised that the girl had thought of a way to use his familiar lace agate. It was noticeable that Agate was very happy with his work, and after the boy's victory, he happily and contentedly handed him the prize he had won. This sight surprised Stephen very much, but when he turned back, he was surprised even more and more, because he saw another acquaintance. Then the guy notices another acquaintance who works on the Ferris wheel. He is happy as he uses his abilities in the right direction, launching his power to make the wheel spin, and the visitors are happy. Looking in the other direction, Stephen sees how Crazy also found himself working in the park. He was smilingly handing out balloons to children and delighting the kids and their parents, who were just as pleased that their children were joyful. As the heroes headed onward, Métis pointed her fingers at the sky, where a plane was flying beautifully and drawing unbelievable patterns. As it turned out, the pilot was also a gem. The pilot handled his task skillfully and beautifully. Everyone who flew with this guy was happy with the emotions that the flight brought them, because this guy was a great pilot. Then Métis shows that Snowflake and her partner also found a job with ice. Together they deftly coped with a huge block of ice and created a miracle with it. Visitors were simply delighted. They could not take their eyes off the beautiful process of work, and in the end received a beautiful, delicious ice cream. Stephen watched from the sidelines, and at one point he felt sad. Sadness washed over him. Métis immediately noticed that the guy was sad and asked him what was wrong. Just as Stephen started to explain the situation, the same bodyguards came by and pointed their fingers at Métis and thanked her. The guy explained that the situation was very scary, because everyone was doing everything that they did in their homeworld, and it was very strange. The guy decides that everyone wants to live as before and not change anything, but the main task is to give them the opportunity to get out of their comfort zone, and the first people he decides to start with are ice cream sellers. Stephen asked them what they were doing in their hometown. One was digging dugouts, and the other was making ice sculptures. Realizing that they were dealing with ice, Stephen decides to completely change their direction and try his hand at being an airplane pilot. The protagonist sends one of the ice cream salesmen on his first flight. When he got on the plane, he said he was scared and not sure if he could fly it. The airplane's propeller was very noisy, so Stephen didn't hear anything the ice cream vendor said, but just tried to be supportive and gave a thumbs up that everything was okay. After gathering his strength, the ice cream vendor was able to take off and start flying in the sky, and the protagonist went on to create his new changes. The second ice cream vendor he led to a roller coaster where people were screaming very loudly. This surprised the vendor, and he asked why they were screaming so much, to which Stephen replied that they just liked it and enjoyed it. The vendor remarked that he liked to hear people screaming. This statement very much surprised the main characters, but they did not really pay attention to it and decided that it is necessary to go to show a new workplace, and went to the house of the manager of the slides. When they got inside, Stephen showed the lever that is responsible for the speed of the slide, and told the salesman to just try it. The satisfied salesman started to add speed to hear even more people screaming, and enjoyed it as much as possible. Stephen and Métis were actually very surprised at this behavior and the joy of the screams, but the guy was so obsessed with helping that he didn't pay any attention to it at all. Then the heroes went to the pizzeria where they decided to appoint new workers there. Stephen began to show how to cut pizza, and the gems tried to repeat it, but it came out at them, to say the least, very badly. Métis was very upset with this experiment. After that, they went to replace the balloon salesman. The one who was cutting the pizza gave her the balls and told her to get used to the new robot. Métis was more and more surprised by the new robot. She was actually very worried about it. The next turn came for the bodyguards. Instead of glasses and a cup in the hands of the bodyguard was a completely different thing. Namely, it turned out to be a bouquet of flowers, and on his head put a bright and cute hat, and said that now his new job will be to sell flowers and bouquets. Stephen was very proud of himself that he was now changing all their destinies and taking them all out of their comfort zone and giving them a direction to a whole new and different life. After doing all the right things, the guy gets hungry and decides that he needs to go and have a delicious fresh pizza for lunch, so he goes to the pizzeria. Stephen came to the pizzeria and realized his order. A few seconds later, he gets a slice of pizza right in his face, and then about a dozen more slices. In the kitchen was just chaos. The new cooks did not care about their work. Their delicious fresh pizza was just porridge. The same porridge was packed in a box. Then the delivery was carried out in the worst way. One of the employees just threw the pizza to each customer. Some just knocked down with it. Then one of the bodyguards, who was selling flowers, came running. He put the flowers on one of the guys, who was lying on the floor from being hit by the pizza, and then put his hand right into his pocket to get the money. After a little rummaging through his pocket, he took out the money and went to the woman, who was also lying on the floor. Leaving the flowers on her, he took her purse. Maximum joy and happiness swept over the bodyguard, for he had completed his task and sold all the flowers and a few. The seller of balloons at one point also flew pizza and spoiled the whole situation. The pizza hit right in the head of the girl, and she was very upset, as the balloon burst and frightened her. The seller wanted to calm the girl and give her a new balloon, but his sharp movement cut the string of all the balls. Meanwhile, a new pilot was flying scared in the sky. Surprisingly, he was still doing very well, but at one point the balls that were cut off got right into the propeller of the airplane, and thus the new pilot lost control. Stephen was very scared, as the city was in full-fledged chaos. Everything was burning and everyone was running in panic. The guy decided to just run away from all these problems and hide from them. Tired of running for a long time, he ran into one place where he decided to take a break. When he looked up, he found that there was a mestizo sitting quietly in this establishment, drinking a tasty alcoholic beverage and looking relaxed. Stephen was just shocked at the situation that was happening on the street. People were running and burning. Meanwhile, Métis was just asking for a refill of a new tasty cocktail. The frightened guy came up to her and began to explain the situation. He was very embarrassed to say that he had screwed up, but it was obvious from him that everything was very bad. Stephen was just beginning to realize what a mess he had made with his new entanglements and stepping out of his comfort zone, so he apologized and asked for help because he had lost control of the situation. Métis was not very happy about the whole situation at first, but then agreed to help the guy to fix everything. Meanwhile, on the street there was just cruelty. Meanwhile, in the sky, having lost control of the airplane, the pilot and passenger were flying just down and screaming fearfully. Meanwhile, the protagonists decide to join forces and start fixing things. Together they dramatically use their crystal magic ability and are reborn into an incredibly powerful being. Having completed his rebirth, this superpowered being tries to save the plane that is about to fall to the ground. He pulls out a crystal lasso and swings it sharply. Swinging very hard with his lasso, he hits and wraps the rope around the plane, thus now being able to pull it towards him. With a sharp and strong movement pulling the airplane with a rope, he suddenly tears off from it only the tail. Realizing that one tail has come off and the plane continues to fall, he pulls out another lasso, which he starts to twist very hard. By spinning the lasso very hard, he makes a propeller out of it, thus lifting himself high into the sky and being able to fly. The plane with its passengers was already flying down to the ground, but at one point the protagonist of the lasso makes a net and a sharp movement tries to pick up the plane. After a few moments he still succeeds. The plane hits the net and careful, gentle movements of the protagonist lowers it to the ground, thereby saving its passengers. Having lowered the plane to the ground, the protagonist begins to rejoice that after all he managed to save them. Coming closer to the passengers of the plane, he smiles at them and asks how they are, but in response, the frightened passengers cannot say a word to him. Rising high into the sky again, the protagonist notices that there is already a huge smoke billowing on the American mountains, and most likely there is trouble there too. The people who were on the roller coaster continued to go around at a great speed. The speed reached more than 160 kilometers per hour, and the new manager could not stop it because he had very little experience in this. The guy decides to instantly go to the rescue. He starts to run, but the speed is not enough. People are about to fall off the rails, and all can be destroyed forever. On the way, Steven thinks about how he can speed up, and in one moment, his crystal superpower encompasses his whole body again, and the instant acceleration starts, and the guy quickly reaches his destination. In a few seconds, Steven was right on top of the slide, and at that moment, he was being flown at high speed by all the people who were on the ride. But in a moment, everything slowed down. At the moment of slowing down, the main character started to save everyone, and eventually he managed to get everyone to the ground, in a safe place, putting people on the floor that they would not worry, and solving the whole situation with the slides. After this situation, Steven and Métis sat on the promenade and laughingly recalled the difficult day with a delicious ice cream. Steven observed how well Métis had organized everything, and that everyone was in the right place, where they were supposed to be. In the meantime, even the bodyguard had thrown off his clothes, and quickly ran to help Madame Mera from the dog that started barking at the old lady. The protagonists looked at each other, and Métis confessed that finally she had found her place. Now she knows exactly what inspires and pleases her. Helping people energizes her and gives her a smile. But the boy was frustrated because he began to realize that the help he wanted so much to provide for everyone was simply not needed, and he had not found his calling. At one point, one of the gems came to him and smiled and said that he wanted to give him a gift, as he was very grateful to the guy. Steven was completely surprised by this turn of events and a little bit even confused. The gem explained to the guy that now he was really happy, and he was very grateful for his work in the park, because now he had the opportunity to enjoy the happy laughter of people, and it was much more pleasant than their frightened screams. The boy looked at Métis, and they laughed together at the funny situation they had experienced in one day. At that moment, the roller coaster carts were passing through them, and as it turned out, they had forgotten about the last little passenger, but luckily he was all right.